Oh, hey everyone, how's it going? Great to have you join us. As you likely know, you're watching Rebel Daily with me, your host, Adam Sos, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Sid Blizzard. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing all right, pretty good. Enjoying the nice Alberta weather while we have it, and yourself.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's lovely out there. We went had a nice little interview with a couple of UCP leadership hopefuls down by the river the other day. Great to be enjoying this nice weather. As you've probably noticed, normally we do this on Monday, but this will be sort of our Alberta focused edition. And as such, it's actually sponsored and brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project. The Alberta Prosperity Project is a not for profit, nonpartisan organization uniting all Albertans to protect their interests, freedoms, and rights. To learn more about the Alberta Prosperity Project and how you can get involved, visit albertaprosperityproject.com. Now, this daily live stream is an incredible opportunity to be able to react to some live news, so to get some feedback on some stories as they're coming back, look back at some of the sort of key stories that we've had over the last little while. But most importantly, it's an opportunity to interact with you, our viewers. That's why we started doing this on a daily basis. We enjoyed this so very much. We're streaming today on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and Getter. You can also send us paid chats through Rumble Rants or Odyssey Hyper Chats. We love engaging with your feedback, and that way we'll sort of, towards the end of the show, respond, read, try and give you some answers on any questions you may have. So if you haven't done that before, consider making today the day you give it a go, and then we can have a conversation with you. Some of the regulars out there, it's great. Every day we get to know you, we get to learn a little bit about you when you're participating in those hyper chats. So very much looking forward to that. And yeah, so consider chipping in that way and helping out. So Sid, what should we talk about first today?
Well, I gotta say, I'm a newcomer to Alberta, right? And being here for just under a year now, I have really learned to enjoy what Alberta has to offer. But before we kind of get into a little bit more about the Alberta news that we have today, I want to point test out something that's happening in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia. And this is His Royalness, His Royal Highness has announced a new project, the Line, which is I want to show you guys this, and I want to talk about this so that you can see the difference between what's going on in Alberta and the rest of the world. So maybe if we
increase prosperity and improve public health, but also to build back better.
If the demands from the farmers are not met, what do you think happens next?
I think the farmers will explode.
I'm afraid it will be a civil war.
Civil war is going to start.
Up to a civil war? I don't know.
I think there's gonna be farmers today or tomorrow, they go to their homes and they say, if you don't come there, we come to you.
Well, I know the farmers a bit, and if they draw a line in the sand, they draw a line in the sand.
I think there's going to be a small civil war. I can imagine it's going to be a lot of mayhem.
Story that's really troubling, and I'll allow you to sort of fill in the details, but kind of from what we've heard, a bit of an older gentleman, Mr. Bialski, was on an airplane making every sort of effort, from what I've heard, to wear his mask, and it came down in the course of sleeping. But basically another one of these crazy stories where an older gentleman, maybe with some medical issues, just being harassed and ultimately arrested because of some mask issues on an airplane. What's the story?
We don't know much at this point, but I'll tell you what we do know is that we have a 76-year-old client, which is obviously a senior. This fellow has had a double hip replacement. He's got numerous medical conditions. One of the nicest guys that we've ever come across. On a flight, WestJet flight, just trying to finish the flight. I believe it was transatlantic as well. I'll have to check the file. We've got so many of these Fight the Fines files, and it's so bizarre to me, Adam, to still be opening Fight the Fines files after the pandemic has supposedly come to an end. This fellow was on the plane. There's allegations from WestJet that this, kind gentleman was essentially belligerent, and he was given a ticket under Canadian aviation regulations for failing to wear a mask, even though he was making best and reasonable efforts to wear a mask. He's a great guy. It's just so bizarre to see the heavy hand of the government and these draconian mandate implementations still affecting seniors and reasonable people in this province. As you know, it's a little calmer.
All right. Apologies for the technical difficulty there. We're back though, and we're here to talk about Alberta and some of the stories. Adam, do you want to just touch base there on
Yeah. So yeah, we do apologize for that. We had some audio cutting out, some issues. They're testing some fire alarm systems here, messing with the internet. Not sure exactly what's happening, but good to be back with you. We were just talking about the obviously we've got this beautiful widespread green Alberta province. We love to share so much space. But you sort of found this incredible story coming from Saudi Arabia. Incredible, maybe haunting, maybe dystopic.
Well, you haven't seen it yet, the video that they put out there, but it's about The Line, a project that's going to be going forward in the Middle East. And it's this kind of revision of what a city should be and how the buildings should be constructed. It's very interesting. I don't know if we have that article on hand, and then there is also the video aspect of that, but it is an incredible project. Whether or not it's a good or a bad thing, I'll leave that aside for the moment until Adam has a chance to look at the video, but it is quite the project, and they say larger than the Eiffel Tower in height. It's 173 kilometers long, I think they said it was. So yeah. It is really a massive project, and it is kind of a turning point. We have cities that rely on a kind of grid structure, and they're all laid out across the land, all the buildings and homes and whatnot. Whereas in The Line, everything is one big building, the entire community, the entire city. So it is quite the sight to see, to say the least.
Let's pull that video up. There is a video. I'm actually going to be live reacting to this. I haven't seen it yet. So let's go to the video of The Line.
For too long, humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The Line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers.
There it is. Build
and we are
the
designing
wall.
it to provide a healthier, more sustainable quality of life.
Future civilization, as they
The
would
Line's
see.
communities are organized in 3 dimensions. Residents
opposed
have
to the rest of
access to
reality.
all their daily needs within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. And the Line's infrastructure makes it possible to travel end-to-end in 20 minutes with no need for cars, resulting in zero carbon emissions.
That's the sales
By
pitch.
leveraging AI technology, services are autonomous, saving you time and effort. Designed by world-leading architects, the Line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade. Intelligent solutions create efficiency and year-round temperate microclimate with natural ventilation.
Same cooling as the
Energy and water
Xbox.
supplies are 100% renewable. The Line is designed as a series of unique communities, offering a wealth of amenities, providing equitable views and immediate access to the surrounding nature.
Equitable views.
With 40% of the world accessible within 6 hours, at the heart of the globe's key trade routes, a place for commerce and communities to thrive like nothing on Earth seen before. The Line, the city that delivers new wonders for the world.
When are you going to be living there?
Yeah, where do I put in my down deposit? I don't want my community to look like a new Samsung device. And it's so that is just like straight lines do not appear in nature.
Yeah.
Like an organic embedded like community is a nice old farmhouse on a big lot with horses out back and a forest growing around it. That's the organic, embedded, natural, real sort of thing that we're looking for. This is a giant mirror facaded line in the middle of the desert. It's about the most inorganic thing I've ever seen. Listen, I don't doubt that this is going to be cool. They're clearly going for some like Vegas-y mile type vibes here. Given that it's Saudi Arabia and some of the other projects there, maybe it'll falter. Maybe they'll actually get this done. We know, obviously, some of the other countries, the UAE, Qatar, a couple of other places, they have no problems using North Korean slave labor. But so it might get done and it might be cool. But the whole pitch of this as this like organic, paying attention to nature on a fundamental sort of, whether you're into poetry or art or engineering, like lines like that don't appear in nature. What was your response? You sort of found the story, but what did you think?
Well, it's ridiculous. You know, it's like you want to live in a box with you and your 9 million friends that you don't know. And, you know, one thing I thought about when I saw that is, you know, if we were to go through this kind of coronavirus response as the government had done in past, you know, in a facility like that, well, you're going to have your little key card that's going to tell you where you're allowed to go. And if they decide that everything needs to get locked down, well, bang, you no longer can use any of the doors in that facility, and your artificial intelligence robot is going to deliver your food to your doorstep. So, you know, I'm not exactly too keen on living in a box like that. And it also makes me think about, you know, if you're trying to be environmentally friendly, and it's a bit of a change of subject when it comes to vehicles, you don't, you know, you have a 10-year-old, 15-year-old vehicle, and it's, you know, reaching the end of its life. You can get a new vehicle, and, you know, some people would say that you should get an electric vehicle to be more environmentally friendly, this and that. But the amount of production that goes into an electric vehicle versus if you went out there and bought a second-hand vehicle, you're saving the planet by buying that second-hand vehicle, even if it is using diesel or using any kind of fuel other than electric. So it's just kind of, I see this in the same way, where they're trying to redesign civilization to what cost? You know, and they say it's going to be environmentally friendly. Well, batteries, they go bad. You're going to have to replace those batteries. Solar panels, they need to be replaced. I think there's a lot that is wrong with this, even though it is a cool looking thing. You know, you stare at it, it's a wonder of the world, so to speak, as they would try and turn it into a Marvel type thing. But I just have no faith in it.
You know, the other thing that really like strikes me is like, and it's because you talked about that sort of, everything is so disposable in society today. And I think that's an issue. Like it used to be more like, oh, swap out for a new component. Now it's the whole thing goes in the garbage. But how many, like you see these massive like landfills of non-biodegradable windmill blades, or even like these batteries that are farmed from these lithium mines destroying places, and then they have to be charged with coal power instead of like more environmentally friendly, ethical Alberta oil. How much of this is going to be in 15, 20 years when the stuff stops working? Well, we can just build another one. It seems so disposable.
No, it is. And, you know, one thing as well is when it comes to the maintenance on a facility like that, maintenance is going to be 24 hours a day. You know, and you get a skyscraper, obviously it's going to have maintenance most of the time. But in a facility like that, it's going to be constant maintenance. And that's at least how I would see it. And, you know, another last thing I'll touch on for this line is it's segmented into communities. That's, you know, part of the pitch.
Quarantined into community.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a quarantine. And not only that, you know, they say equitable views and this and that. Well, I guarantee you, you know, this block community is going to have a much nicer,
more equitable.
Than the community adjacent to it or further down the line. You know, so there is going to be that separation of economic viability between those who have everything and those who have nothing, especially in a place like Saudi Arabia.
And it just looks like something out of like Blade Runner or some dystopic novel. Like you can see the like people in the desert attacking during a rebellion or whatever. It's wild. And it's so much of this. There may be some cool concepts here. It could be a very cool sort of tech display. But almost everything here is just pandering to World Economic Forum talking points. That is the crux of all of this. And now I don't know if we can bring it back to Alberta now and talk about some of this stuff. So yeah, kick that off.
Well, and you're going to have to give me a little more detail into this, but Danielle Smith, one of the candidates for the UCP leadership to replace Jason Kenney after he decided he would be stepping down as the leader.
He was invited to step down, kind of.
But either way, Danielle Smith, she's in one hand come out strong against the World Economic Forum, you know, saying we don't need these guys, you know, you're going to own nothing and be happy. Well, That's not the plan for Canada, so to speak.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, and you're fill me in on this, she's also touched up, and actually we have it on screen right now. So Danielle, how do you feel about the World Economic Forum? And then let's see her answer there, you know, as she condemns Trudeau and Notley. The World Economic Forum are anti-democratic elites who have been attacking our province for years. No one in my government will be permitted to have any ties with their organization. But then, in the other side of the conversation, she was talking about net zero, and she was advocating for a net zero stance, which is very strongly tied in with the World Economic Forum agenda. Parse that out for me, and maybe we'll pull that up shortly.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because Danielle Smith was, can she do it? Very much. I did a long, extensive interview with her. We talked about the World Economic Forum and lots of this stuff. And she very quickly went from can she really do it to like a clear front runner in the eyes of just about everybody. And it was because she was uncompromising on freedom, which for anyone out there paying attention, the management of COVID-19 issues is why, in a major way, Jason Kenney is not the leader anymore. Most people weren't particularly upset with him on economics or the other stuff he was doing. It was the COVID-19 response, the vaccine mandates, all that sort of stuff. So she right away was the first person, and she was doing it. I mean, Todd Loewen would be the other person who very early on sort of paid a price. But these are people who from the get-go were anti-World Economic Forum, anti-lockdown, sort of taking a bold stance on this. Here we go. So for Danielle Smith to come out and use this net zero terminology. Now, I've had the opportunity to be at a number of sort of smaller town halls in remote regions, and I've heard her talk about this at length. And I think one of the major issues here is you're doing yourself a disservice by using World Economic Forum talking points like that term net zero. So many freedom-oriented people, so many sort of Alberta energy, ethical oil oriented people hear someone say net zero and they're like, gross. There'll be an interview coming out soon today. In fact, I did with Todd Loewen, and we asked about why candidates, even if they're ultra pro oil, feel the need to sort of pander on these net zero type initiatives. During that UCP debate, Danielle Smith said she's sort of done a complete 180 on this, and now she thinks that net zero is attainable. Well, Canada barely emits emissions compared to these other contributors, and when you calculate the sort of upcycling from trees, we're almost there. We're very close to there. The sort of net contribution of Canada is in the less than 2% range compared to some of these other countries.
Well, and not only that, I should add, you know, given that we have the oil patch up here in Alberta, of course, the amount of research and development that has gone into that and come out of that is astounding, and it's the reason why we have more efficient, more environmental practices when it comes to the production of oil, the production of natural gas. It's because of the oil sands that we have this. And yet, at every turn, they're trying to just shun it. They're trying to do away with it. They're trying to hinder it in any way they possibly can, even though if their end goal was, you know, environmental advocacy. Well, then you would look to the oil sands instead of looking to China or looking to Russia or wherever else, because we actually want to uphold those standards. And, you know, to touch on, you know, we can say, you know, environmental advocacy, right? And for them, environmental advocacy is, you know, no more nitrogen, no more methane, no more carbon dioxide. For us, it's just like, clean up your mess.
Clean up your mess. You cut down some trees, plant some trees.
He couldn't even do that.
No,
he couldn't even plant trees.
And this is, I want to jump back to the Saudi thing, because we literally have the people virtue signaling on this, and we're going to talk about Trudeau in a minute, but you have these celebrities jet setting all over the world. You have environmental and human rights violators like Venezuela, Iran, Saudi Arabia selling oil to these people virtue signaling because they have these little 100-mile projects, whatever the line. Meanwhile, the most ethical oil on the planet, both in terms of the environment and in terms of human costs, people are apologizing for it. And I don't think Danielle Smith is outright apologizing for it. And given that I've had the opportunity to hear her speak at length, I think what she's trying to say, and in fact what she has said, is listen, like, we've got the technology to do this. It may be a scheme. I'm not putting those words in her mouth, but we can sell carbon capture to people and make money on it, and we can sell our oil and make money on it. So I think that there's a place there for, like, yeah, sure, you want to give us $1 billion to suck some stuff out of the air? It's anti-mining. You're taking stuff in, putting it underground.
Well, the biggest irony of the whole environmental movement is that the more you go down that road, the more you depend on oil, the more you depend on natural gas to facilitate this environmental industry, I guess you could say. So they're in some senses they're shooting themselves in the foot for not being creative.
Well, and the other thing too is, I mean, the problem is, sure, it's like, okay, there's all this money out there, the government's spending all this money, let's take some of the money. I get that sentiment in the sort of libertarian let's make money way. But the problem, and I think the problem lots of people have with using net zero terms and World Economic Forum terms, is in a way you're validating and building up their system. Even if you're like, well, I don't really believe this is for the environment, but we'll take your money, you're feeding into and ramping up the system, even if it's for personal gain. And I think that I think Albertans are a little more principled than that. I think they don't want to say, well, sure, we'll do this. We'll ramp up your system as long as we're getting rich.
Well, and lastly, I'll just add to that. There's this tweet I absolutely love it, from Lewis Brackpool, our reporter out of the UK. And it's, I believe it was COP26, one of the environmental summits that was happening in Glasgow, I think it was. But either way, on the highway to this event or in the area, there's a big sign, net zero, save the environment. And the funny part about it was that this advocatorial or advocacy type message was being powered by a diesel generator on the side of the road, right? So it just sums up this whole environmental thing in a nutshell.
That's the crux of it. It's like all of these things, everyone preaching. Listen, no one's perfect. There we go. They're so fast. Good job in the studio. Thanks again.
Isn't that just beautiful?
Yeah, that's wonderful. This is it in a nutshell. Like you're going to be able to find like some level of hypocrisy with everyone. It doesn't matter. I was going to say with the Pope, but that's pretty easy. But with it doesn't matter if it's the Dalai Lama or the worst environmental activist hypocrite in the world, you're going to be able to find something. But with all of this progressive stuff, it's so self-evident. It's like an Ouroboros. Everything they say contradicts everything else they say. And every single one of them is doing one thing or saying one thing while doing another. The people who work on oil rigs are like, we're going to clean up after ourselves and we're going to provide oil for the world. It's not this giant complicated web of complication and confusion, because they're not lying. They're just providing an honest service.
And the thing is, it's just a larger production, right? People will cry, it's like, oh, they're destroying the trees or whatever. Well, okay, let's say there's, 100 or whatever acres and they're going through that land. Well, what do they do after they're done refining the materials that were underground? They put everything back and they plant trees. They regrow the natural environment that was there. And a lot of the complaining, I think, does come from just the fact of how large the oil patch really is.
Yeah. Well, and it's they really don't like, another part of this is the anti sort of Western sentiment. Yeah. They don't like that, like Alberta, no matter what, will have a flex. And the other thing too is we've got the farmers, we've got the oil. We can leave and be just fine. It's the same thing, and we showed a little bit while we were having some technical difficulties, the Dutch Rebellion stuff. But Alberta would be absolutely fine on its own. Frankly, we're sort of footing the bill for the rest of the country, and wherever you stand on separation, Alberta doesn't need Ottawa and Ontario, but Ottawa and Ontario need Alberta.
Yeah, exactly. Alberta has its own legs to stand on. Yeah. Whereas Ottawa is they're trying to punish us while simultaneously trying to take what we're gaining.
Exactly. So, and the one of the sort of cartoon examples is this, like, oh, there's like 3 ducks in a tilling pond, like they're dead. There's like 400 bald eagles murdered by these windmills, and no one's, or the generators, turbines. No one's willing to go there or talk about it.
Yeah, windmills, they compete with cats, don't they, when it comes to the killing of birds?
Oh, yeah.
And part of that is because a lot of birds, of course, migrate, and they have their migration path, which usually follows the wind. Yeah. And what else follows the wind? Oh, the windmills. Oh, what do you know? So we're going to put the windmills in the path of the birds, and we're going to call it environmentally friendly. Good job, guys.
Good job. Rubber stamp. You did it. Yeah. Unreal. Let's get into this. We were going to take an ad break and watch the Dutch Rebellion trailer. Did we get through all of that, or should we throw to that again? I think they watched probably most of that. Very much looking forward to that. Yeah. Okay, we got through it. So that's incredible. Kian has been doing some incredible work on that. So be sure.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and Lewis and Lincoln as well, who went to the Netherlands. Good on them. There was a lot that was going on there, and there was a lot of reports that came out of that. And of course, now, as you saw, there's a bit of a documentary being put together by our Kian Simone K2, as many of you might know him. So I encourage you guys to check that out. What's the link for that?
That is, I believe, at farmerrebellion.com. They'll confirm in a moment in the studio. And for folks out there, the trailer is out now, and I believe that's on Rebel News Plus, coming out later today. It'll likely be available for everyone, but this is a great time to mention we don't take those big handouts from the government. We rely entirely on your support. And one of the great ways you can support us, get unprecedented access, get access to those documentaries, ad-free browsing on our website, is by becoming a Rebel News Plus member. It costs $8 a month or less. I think if you sign up for a year, it's like $6.67. And that keeps us doing this incredible work, keeps us pumping out this content. So do consider supporting us in that way. Let's get into some more of this sort of climate hypocrisy. There's so many places to go, but I wanted to, and we'll jump ahead a little bit, just out of consideration for time, but I wanted to talk about this environmental group claiming that they're deflating tires on SUVs in Vancouver. I don't know if you guys are aware, but that actually significantly we'll get into the how dangerous this is and the safety thing, but and another glaring element of hypocrisy, that reduces the efficiency of vehicles like massively. Not to mention the fact that it's literally incredibly dangerous, and I think that could be criminal neglect leading to like physical harm.
Well,
this is insane.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is, and I think one of the things I heard about that is I don't know if it was a lawyer or if someone was just commenting on the situation where they were saying that this group is going to start moving lower or considering doing this same kind of activity in the Lower Mainland, and this is the deflating of tires, car vehicle tires or trucks or whatever tires, and the pushback that this individual had mentioned is that there's going to be serious legal consequences if you try that, so maybe this was a one-off, maybe they're going to keep on attempting this, and maybe there will be legal consequences that follow. But from what I understand, this stemmed, or maybe it stemmed prior to this, but from New York, and there was a similar activity that happened in New York a couple weeks ago. Either they were slashing or deflating tires, and then that movement kind of kicked off a little bit. So I think this stems from that. But either way, imagine turning on your car in the morning and, you don't think anything of it. You don't realize your tires are deflated. You start the car, you start going. Well, some people are maybe immediately going to realize, but other people, they're not going to know what's happening. Maybe they'll just continue on driving, and then all of a sudden that tire gets ripped off the wheel and you got no more traction. So you're sliding down one of those hills in Vancouver and you're dead.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is the person who's likely not going to notice that, there's certainly likely a demographic of families that drives SUVs, maybe mom busy rushing the kids in, trying to get to work. The least likely person to notice a little in the wheels, cars loaded with kids. The wild thing here is, imagine, we literally saw the Coastal GasLink like machete attack. We're seeing people deflating cars and creating a fundamentally dangerous situation. And yet, where's like the Emergencies Act to stop these people?
Exactly. And I spent a lot of time down there in Coots. As people might remember, there was the blockade there. And near the tail end, or just after we had left, I forget the exact day that this happened, but there was either in BC or Alberta a massive, I guess it's fair to say it's an attack. It was an attack on an outpost, so to speak, for either a logging or an oil
it was the industry. Coastal link.
It was that one.
Vancouver, BC.
And they destroyed the facility. Like the buildings were destroyed. I think it was the excavator had damage, or some vehicles had heavy damage. It's insane. That is terrorism, in my opinion. And, I don't mean to rile anybody up when I say that, but terrorism is you're trying to instill fear into these people through these tactics.
It's terrorism, and I don't care if I rile anybody up.
No. You're right. But then as well, there's another blockade happening in BC right now. More probably some of the same environmental people might be aware, who are probably the tire deflating. But 30 people have now blocked RCMP vehicle at Northwest BC pipeline site as protests continue the tariff standards. So this is another one of the there we have it on screen. So this is another one of those environmental related blockades, and especially related to a pipeline. We've seen a few of those, like the other one in Alberta, who some Albertan, I'm not going to call him a folk hero, but he's been called the folk hero, came in for the CN rail blockade and just was like, no, we're going to move all this trash off the train tracks. So but that in BC, and I've seen there's one group down there that's really has formed a hard line defending the deforestation. I forget the exact name of the group, but the battle between RCMP police officers in BC and these protesters, it gets pretty wild. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty nuts. It's all in the bush. There's maybe 30 to 50 people involved max. It's not like a thousands and thousands of people on the street kind of protest. But There is heavy.
It's like a
confrontation.
Yellowstone scene. It's not a war, but there's some conflict.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'll let you continue.
No, and I literally, I think just you can juxtapose that with Pastor Artur Pawlowski. I know this is Critical Infrastructure Defense Act in Alberta I'm talking about, but you literally have people blocking railways, blocking pipelines, attacking offices, literally engaging in critical infrastructure attacks, which laws like Critical Infrastructure Defense Acts are meant to guard against. And they're not being utilized in those cases for political reasons. And then in the most, I mean, it's
literally the most peaceful protest.
Yeah. And this wasn't even and you were down in Coots, I was in Milk River. This wasn't like the literal guy blocking the road was charged under the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. This was a pastor who visited them. The double standards are wild.
And he was only there for 1 day. Yeah. For 1 day he was there.
And it was hours.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a full day. Like it's unreal. And now we are seeing, we've talked about this before, and I will no doubt continue to talk about it. There are significant legal victories coming. But until those sort of certain groups getting special treatment and free passes, that stuff ends. You know, the coastal gas line that they're working on there, I think it's something like 19 of 20 of that community, the bands, elected councils have voted in favor. And the other one, it was like basically it was virtually unanimous, or it was a split. So 19 and then a split, something like that. You can look up the exact numbers, but effectively entirely unanimous among all elected band councils, the entire length of the railway. The people, the pipeline, the people protesting are largely coming in from outside or self-proclaimed hereditary chiefs or activists. They aren't the actual communities themselves that would benefit from this.
Well, and that's the thing, is a lot of Indigenous communities do actually benefit from these larger
number one employer of Indigenous communities.
Exactly, right? So, and it's a big shame that we see all this controversy. It's like pushing oil against the Indigenous community when realistically it's these, I don't know what you would call them, but these people who've lived in basically cities their whole life, they hear about the Indigenous struggle of those in Canada, and it's like they're living through, what is it, Avatar? That
vicariously?
Yeah, exactly. They're vicariously living through this Avatar fantasy of theirs, where it's like, oh, these, they're smart and they have a different way of life and this and that, but they need my help. They need my help, and I know what they need. That's the kind of mentality a lot of these advocates take.
Well, and these people who are preaching, I'm like, you ever been on the res?
Yeah.
No, none of them have. They've never talked to these people. I'm not professing to be an Indigenous expert, but we repaired the church roof. We share their stories. We speak with Indigenous people, try and give them an opportunity to share their voice. That's a lot more than these advocates have ever done.
We don't speak for them.
We give them a platform. Yeah, exactly. And we don't only go to the sort of Trudeau rolls out the same 2 or 3 sort of people who are going to echo his talking points. And we don't put a camera on the Indigenous people who aren't even from the local community, but they're there protesting. We go and talk to the actual locals. And I think that matters. We do have to take a little break here. It's not so much a break, but it's actually an opportunity for you to check out this incredible work we're doing. Another little bit of incredible work by our Andrea Humphreys.
And Matt Brevner.
And Matt Brevner, of course. Kudos. He's doing some incredible work. Setting the story straight on some other Indigenous stories, giving some of those folks a platform, and seeking the truth wherever that may lead us. So let's jump into this Kamloops trailer and take a look at that right away.
The remains of 215 children have been found in a mass grave in Canada.
Many of you know that just over a year ago, the discovery of the remains of 215 children was found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School at the Kamloops-Shuswemic First Nation. But what if I were to show you that what I just said wasn't true, and that in fact, a year later, not a single body has been found?
This mass grave is a painful reminder of the genocide.
Canada's leaders aren't condemning the burning of churches. No, they're endorsing the burning of churches.
A juvenile rib bone that surfaced in the same area.
You'd be surprised the number of people who say, I'm a doctor, I'm a paramedic, and this is definitely a human bone, and it's definitely not.
Looks like the chief.
Yes.
I am absolutely so happy, because when you talk to actual Indigenous people, even the Pope was just here, we were in Edmonton, we had the opportunity to speak to lots of residential school survivors. and they're like, Trudeau is not for us. He has his own agenda. Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau, it's just repugnant that they're campaigning on this. Meanwhile, we still have 27 First Nations communities that don't have clean drinking water, which we're going to be doing a lot on in the next little while here. But they'll show up and campaign on these mass graves, which in fact are not mass graves. Some of them, it has turned out, have been upturned apple orchards, and that disruption in the soil they thought was a mass grave. I believe there might be like one or two individuals where they don't know exactly where they were buried. Lots of these are sort of lost cemeteries. But when you talk about where some of these sort of lost cemeteries are with Indigenous people, they're like, we've known about this forever.
Exactly.
This scandal is literally just political campaigning. And these same politicians who said mass grave villainy, they never came back and said, oh, I guess we overreacted, and maybe we shouldn't have done that because we saw dozens of churches vandalized, burned. They generated this massive sort of wound. And in fact, there was this wound that was sort of healing. Truth and Reconciliation was underway. And then they just ripped at that scab as it was healing. And I'm so happy that Dre is doing that work and shedding a light on that. What's your sort of reaction to that?
No, yeah, likewise. I really do look forward to seeing that once it's fully available. And yeah, it's a very terrible cycle that a lot of our politicians have fallen into, where they'll use sentimentalism to gain people's attention. You know, they don't, I mean, honestly, most of these politicians probably don't care about these issues that are on the ground, let's say, when it comes to clean water supply or other issues like that. They just don't care. They use it as, like, let me put it this way. People enjoy rooting for the little guy. You know, the David and Goliath situation. Not many people are rooting for Goliath in these kinds of scenarios. They know this, so they'll take advantage of that, and they'll look to the smallest, you know, minority or any minority that they can. They'll put that skin suit on and they'll tell you, you know, you should be sympathetic. You should vote for me because we care about these people, when really they don't. These politicians use people like this for the reason of sentimentally gaining followers and gaining attention, because most of the people out there don't actually follow the news in an in-depth manner.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, that it's so funny, for all the language of misappropriation, that's literally what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing too that is so shameful about it is they've also created a narrative that it's like racist to ask questions or be concerned. So it's like, we're going to do all this crazy stuff. We're going to blanket it in the sort of Indigenous narrative, and then if you ask questions about it, you're a racist and you're stepping on their turf. That is not what's happening whatsoever here. That is what they're doing themselves. That's what Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, people like this are doing. Let's jump back a little bit. We're having a conversation about the glaring hypocrisy. Right. And I mean, you can talk about Leonardo DiCaprio, you can talk about Fawcett, whoever else you want to talk about. But Justin Trudeau really, really, really just takes the cake.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this story.
Yeah, Trudeau hits the nail on the head when it comes to hypocrisy. And for all of the crying that he'll do when it comes to, you know, environmentalism, you know, we're going to have zero gas-fueled cars by 2035 or whatever fantasies he lives in. I just want to read this one headline for you. In 1 month, Trudeau used enough fuel to power a trucker convoy. In a month. And, you know, right now he's going on vacation, right?
Costa Rica.
More jet fuel. And recently he did this pit stop in Calgary where he flipped some pancakes at a Liberal fundraiser event. And because the Stampede was going on, it counted as a Stampede event. So he's like, oh, I'm at the Stampede, you know, hi, everybody. Even though he gave nobody a due warning or due notice that he would be there. So it was very much so a surprise visit. Flip some pancakes, take some photos, leave. And that's 2 flights in 1 day over a photo shoot. He didn't even stay a couple extra days to actually do work.
Yeah.
So that just shows you where he's at. I mean, the amount of jet fuel this guy spends is unbelievable.
And does it say that? I think it was like there was 11 days he hasn't been on a jet, like in total or something insane in a year?
Probably, yeah. It would not surprise me.
This stuff it's absolutely just shocking. This article is really great, actually. I urge people to check it out because it breaks down like how many trips you could take in a Hummer. If you had a Honda, like you could travel around the world however many times. It's absolutely just the most bizarre non-business oriented campaigning stuff. And this isn't even, I'm sure we're going to get A-tips on this. We know how much this guy drinks and eats and consumes on these flights. It is going to be so interesting.
And let me just add there, the byline, I think it was, the Justin Trudeau's July jet travel also emitted roughly 85.8 tons of greenhouse gases into the Earth's atmosphere. The yearly Canadian average is 4.1 tons. So that's about, what, 21 times roughly the amount of greenhouse gas.
And that's just flying in July. So in just July, just his flight alone, I can't even imagine the other stuff, was basically the equivalent of like 20 Canadians for a whole year.
Same as a trucker convoy.
Or a trucker convoy.
Yeah, you think about that. You know, I think about the convoy that we had here. That you know what? This picture, the same amount of fuel for one person.
Danielle Smith said she did a 180 on net zero. I'm going to do one right now too. I'm a radical environmentalist. Justin Trudeau must be stopped. He's the most damaging environmental violator in this country's history. I am so interested to look back, like once he's no longer the leader, which hopefully will be soon, to do like a day, like a quotidian cost analysis, divide a cost per average compared to past leaders of this country. I bet it's going to be jarring. We could probably do that already. Sheila's probably watching. She's probably already ordering an A-tip.
Well, and what we got to do is adjust for inflation.
Of course.
Just inflation.
That's why he's doing it. He's like, inflation was 10%. It's unreal stuff. Let's jump ahead a little bit to save a little bit of time here. But speaking of Justin Trudeau, this is a perfect transition. We've got this really great, fun Justin Trudeau shirt. I'm sure you've probably seen it. It's doing really well. The amount of people who've come up to me and said, hey, check out this really great shirt. I got this Rebel News store, but we've got an ad for it. Let's just roll that ad. I think Dave Menzies shot this. So I love Dave. Exactly. He's the best. So let's jump to that ad now.
Hey folks, check out the newest arrival to the Rebel News store. Yes, F is for Fidel and F is for father. I mean, could it be? Yes, half this photo, the colored half, is Justin Trudeau. The black and white half is a young Fidel Castro. Wait now, or is it vice versa? It's so confusing. I'm a huge Forensic Files fan. Wouldn't it be great if we could have piece of Justin's DNA and a piece of Fidel's DNA and put the rumor to bed once and for all? But in the meantime, we'll just have to walk around wearing this shirt, hinting at a great Canadian conspiracy. Or is it? In any event, if you want to get this shirt, folks, go to the Rebel News store and check this out. Type in our new discount code, that's SUMMER, SUMMER, and if you buy 2 unisex t-shirts, you get an additional one for free. What a deal. Like I said, Justin Trudeau, Fidel Castro, as they used to say on the ABC detergent ads, can you tell the difference? I can't tell the difference.
That's great. I love that shirt. You know, one thing I really love, we've got so many more designs now. Kudos to some of the team. I mean, Danny does some incredible designs, so I got to give a shout out. Some of the stuff there we had for the Free the Beef campaign, which was pretty darn successful, I might add. But there's a steer on one of the shirts, and it says, "I don't need a warning label." Whether someone's a Rebel fan or they're passionate about beef, or they think that Castro is Justin's dad, there's something for you on Rebel News. Store.com. I love that V Half of A's shirt. I've got that one as well. So check that out. Grab a shirt. Again, that goes a long way to keeping us hard at work telling these important stories. Sid, you had a story you wanted to share.
Speaking of Trudeau and the Castro look-alike situation, if you did want to do any research on that and actually go down to Cuba or go down to Central America to do some investigating, well, for the last 2 years, if you were unvaccinated, that wasn't an option. As you know, we've had some of the most restrictive, some of the most draconian vaccine mandates on the planet. And now we've got this headline here. I'm just going to read through the headline and I'll ask you after. Court documents reveal Canada's travel ban had no scientific basis. What does that mean, Adam? I thought science was religion. How could it? Okay, just go on.
You know, I would never on YouTube dare to question the advice of our health officials, but it seems that whether it's Arthur Pawlowski, the Court of Appeals rulings, or travel bans in the country, courts are now beginning to question the validity of some of these decisions. I'm not going to say too much more, but it is very interesting, and it will be interesting to see what the health officials will be saying moving forward and what government officials will be saying moving forward.
But even with the ability for the unvaccinated to now travel, do you think they're ever going to be able to catch up to Trudeau's level of greenhouse gas emissions?
Never.
Never? No, probably not.
Never. Not as individuals. I don't think just the amount of time spent sitting waiting for bags and going through security at Pearson, Trudeau doesn't do that.
And lastly, I'll let you take over after, is we've got how many? 6 million Canadians that were unvaccinated who couldn't travel.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in a month, that's how much 80-something tons of greenhouse gas emissions is what Trudeau is going to spend on jet fuel, while millions of Canadians are being denied that access to travel.
And you know, this next story ties in absolutely perfectly, but on the just glaring note of double standards and hypocrisy, you know, I'm going to talk about the story. It's really resonating with people. And while we are having some tech difficulties, you guys check that out. I got an update from Chad Williamson of Williamson Law. A 76-year-old man was flying, I believe, from France to Canada, and being 76 years old, having a number of issues. I guess he had a double hip replacement. He's got some medical concerns. While he was eating or taking some breaks, trying to catch his breath. I know I've got like a little bit of asthma. I'm like, if ever, not that I really wear a mask, but the odd time flying had to, I'd be like struggling to breathe. So this guy, he was endeavoring to keep it up, and he had it on his face and fell asleep, and it slid down while he was sleeping, according to this Alec Bielski. I'm probably getting that wrong, but I wrote it. I should probably know. But Chad Williamson was relaying that effectively it fell down, and he was arrested for non-compliance. Yeah. Arrested. He was endeavoring to wear his mask. He didn't get on a plane, which, I mean, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it. He didn't get on a plane and say, no, I do what I want. Yeah. Get out of my way. He was efforting.
Yeah. He wasn't being defiant at all. Yeah. He was just some guy on an airplane. You know, and it's like, this is a very simple situation. And I can even picture for myself, you know, very few times have I actually had to wear a mask. And one of those times was, you know, taking a flight. And I remember on that flight and the flight back, I would, you know, be on the flight. I would make sure I buy a pack of Pringles or whatever, a pack of snack food. I'm not promoting Pringles, just any kind of snack food. And then the rule is when you're on these planes is you're allowed, if you're drinking or if you're eating, well, obviously you can't do that with your mask on. So you just sit there for, you know, however many hours your flight is, one by one, eating those chips. You know, you don't put the mask back on. This is exactly it. It's science. You know, I can go a whole flight with my mask down because I'm eating something and putting spit into the air and this and that, whatever. This guy falls asleep and his mask goes down a little bit and he's getting arrested. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's unreal. We are looking forward to more details. And we do want to make sure we get the story straight, because I guess there was one or two things before where he was taking too long eating and they were kind of harassing him. But this seems one, and he's like, okay, whatever. So he put it on, fell asleep, it slid down. This seems like one of those sort of power hungry, power tripping flight, whatever we're supposed to call the flight helpers, had a vendetta, didn't like this guy. And I mean, from a common sense perspective, 76-year-old man having some issues, that's who you're going to make an example of and see that he's arrested?
Well, these flight attendants got to rein it in. Like I've seen some of the videos where they're getting frantic at couples who have children, young children, who, you know, it's like a 4-year-old or a toddler, you know, a 2-year-old, a baby that can't wear the mask or won't wear the mask or gets all screamy and everything like that. And they'll kick them off the plane. It's like, this is a literal child, you know.
How heartless.
Exactly. How heartless, honestly. And, you know, we've seen this because a lot of people are traveling not for the sake of luxury like Justin Trudeau, but so that they can see family members who are dying.
You don't travel daily for photo ops?
Yes, honestly, right?
You're not Catherine McKenna or Justin Trudeau, I guess. Yeah. And, you know, this is the other thing, too, is the media that has just harped on this. Well, Pope Francis, while these laws were still in effect, he sure wasn't wearing a mask when he was flying over Canada. As well, he shouldn't, because he's an old man with serious medical issues who can barely get anywhere. It's incredible. He crossed the ocean in order to, whatever you think of the apology, he hauled himself across an ocean to say sorry. by the way, which most Indigenous people we talked to they're a little torn over the whole thing, but they took him as earnest for lots of the malice of. There are lots of people buying into Justin Trudeau's finger pointing at the church when it was in fact the government who paid for and did so much of this residential school stuff.
Didn't Trudeau's father have something to do with residential schools?
His father, Coetzee. It wasn't until 1997 that the last one was closed. But hey, we don't want to talk about that. It's that old guy who didn't wear a mask on an airplane. Yeah. But the what I was getting to, sorry, excuse my little diatribe, but the mainstream media who has been finger pointing and snitching and heralding all these talking points. Well, the Pope wasn't wearing a mask. They didn't want to seem uncool because Pope Francis is not wearing a mask. There's photos of all of them not wearing masks on this flight.
Exactly.
It's absolutely wild. Meanwhile, while we're moving on from the pandemic, things are starting to normalize again. 76-year-old man is arrested.
Yeah.
It's absolutely surreal.
You know, and then there's the problem of when you land. Sorry, I'm going off, but there's the problem of when you land with the ArriveCan app. And I think there was another individual, an elderly man who was confined to a chair. And I think his son or the person who was with him was arguing with the ArriveCan person, this bureaucrat at the airport, who was saying, you know, you have to have the ArriveCan app, you have to download it, you have to do all this and that. It's like this older fellow doesn't have a phone.
Yeah.
And these are the extremes that we're trying to push these individuals to.
There was an incredible quote Kian actually sent to me. We're probably not going to be able to pull it up on the fly. I think it was actually a National Post journalist or something. And they said, for everyone tweeting, like, ArriveCan worked fine for me, why don't you go tweet to journalists writing on Indigenous issues that your tap water is perfectly fine?
Yeah.
Because that's basically the gist of it. People out there have lost any sense of sympathy and compassion in understanding that, like, there's people with respiratory issues. There's people, by the way, who have encountered abuse in their life, sometimes sexual abuse, who the sentiment, or even people with psychological issues that lead to sort of sensory problems. I know one case we reported on was a young girl who was kicked out of school because her doctor's note expired. And her doctor was apprehensive about renewing a note because they were afraid they'd get in trouble with the College of Physicians. Yeah. This girl changed like 7 times when we got to the house. Like, she kept going upstairs with her parents because the clothes was bothering her. So it had to be just right for her to function. A mask was like it would be a borderline death sentence. Exactly. The school kicked her out. This is the same sort of stuff. We've lost compassion, we've lost sensibility and sensitivity for other people's issues, and it's very often these ultra liberal gentiles saying everyone should mask, no exceptions.
Well, I was for one of the stories I was doing, it was about a university and a student who was having a mask, I don't want to call it a battle, but a mask dispute, whether or not he should have had to have worn one on campus. And then I looked at the university's policy when it came to mask exemptions. And part of that policy was the fact that if you have mask-related acne, if you have mask-related, issues of any kind, respiratory issues or bronchitis or whatever it might be, and you have issues like this that are related to you wearing a mask, you're not allowed an exemption.
Yeah.
Isn't that just despicable? I don't know what to say to that.
It's unreal. Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you completely accept all the health officials' narratives, which of course we do because we're on YouTube, someone who has respiratory issues would likely be aware that they're more vulnerable to COVID-19, and therefore they wouldn't lightly not be wearing a mask. They would be doing it because they have trouble breathing. I'm not going to lie. I'm a big guy. I consume a lot of oxygen, generally speaking, and I'm always talking, which doesn't help. But I have like a headache for hours after a flight if I have to wear a mask. I feel oxygen deprived. I don't feel great. So imagine someone with a serious respiratory issue, or someone 76, someone in their 80s. Everything becomes a little more burdensome as you get older. Not having any sort of compassion. And the problem is the people who were compassionate, the people who were willing to take a stand, they got rid of them all. Yeah. They got rid of them all because lots of them weren't willing to go along with this. And that's why the critical thinkers, the people who would be resolving so many of these air travel issues today in this country, well, they're no longer working there. Yeah. I do want to talk about this absolutely unreal, the Dina Hinshaw, the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Yeah. I'd love a bonus like that. I'll sign up for one of those bonuses.
Is she lying about kids with cancer dying from COVID again, or what?
Yeah, that must get you a big bonus.
Yeah.
It's unreal. If we can pull up that tweet, I think Danielle Smith, Brian Jean, I think was one of the first people to comment on this. Todd Lowen, I know, did a video on it. And Danielle Smith also tweeted about this.
Yeah.
Dina Hinshaw, say what you will about her bangs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are a staunch lockdown advocate or a freedom fighting person who doesn't believe in any of this. She did not use scientific evidence. She sort of followed other places, which, I mean, you could argue maybe they use scientific evidence, but it was very much a chasing your tail. When she was called to appear in court, she had a very hard time sort of saying, we did this based on this study. There's a hesitancy to be accountable, to be open to questioning. And look at that bonus amount again. Can we pull that up on the screen one more time?
It's
Sorry.
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. So her base salary already almost $400,000, $363,000. Her COVID bonuses, $227,000, almost $228,000.
I guess CERB was too good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, us plebs, you know, we had to struggle. We were, you know, how many of us lost our jobs?
Yeah.
I used to work in a kitchen. You know, I can tell you a lot of people in the cooking industry, in the restaurant industry, I should say, lost their jobs, along with plenty of other industries. Yeah. And we were what, you know, get your CERB, you know, you get your little chump change every week, every bi-weekly, whatever it is. Meanwhile, the bureaucrats who are locking you down and destroying your jobs, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Bonuses. Yeah. We're all in this together. I'm just making 10, 20, 30 times what you're making. It's absolutely offensive. And the thing is the reason these health bureaucrats arguably are overpaid or well paid is because eventually they might have to deal with a crisis like this. So Dina Hinshaw has been making this almost $400,000 salary for years. And then finally she has to do something substantive, which I mean, most would argue she did a bad job, and she gets bonuses. This is so just across government, across the board. And it is so integral that whoever the next leader of the UCP is fixes this, because it's insane.
Yeah. Well, how many times has she been caught lying? How many times has she advocated for masks or vaccines without scientific justification for her doing so?
Yeah.
And how much of that is tied to these bonuses?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, and that is a very, very good question. You know, though, I honestly, my inclination on this is that there's just it's such a disconnect from the real world that they're just paying their own sort of elite class that is separate from everybody else, regardless of anything. Like, these people are just getting bonuses for working a bit of overtime. There's no justification. A $300,000 $400,000 contract covers a little bit of overtime, but a $250,000 effectively bonus, while the rest of us, and this whole narrative of we're all in it together, it's sickening. It's absolutely, and
well, it falls apart real quick as soon as you realize you can't take Trudeau's private jet to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
That's where it falls apart.
Yeah.
Because it's their stuff, not yours.
Yeah.
It's their money, not yours. You get, like I mentioned, you know, your little CERB, you know, $1,000 a month or whatever, while they get to live lavishly.
And the other thing, too, is on such a core level, what that did, and there's like these job shortages, the people who were working $2,000 a month or whatever jobs at McDonald's, well, they're like, I'm just going to get CERB.
Exactly.
The families who were actually for years contributing through high-paying jobs to the taxes extensively, they got the same CERB benefit as a kid who just maybe didn't even graduate university. It is such an absolute disconnect.
Well, that's actually one of the things too with CERB is how many prisoners got CERB?
Yeah.
I mean, people that shouldn't have been getting CERB were getting CERB.
Yeah.
And there's money just flowing out the door with these politicians, and none of it's going to us.
There was a gang in Montreal that was all claiming CERB and buying guns with it.
Exactly.
Like, this stuff is completely disjointed from reality, and there's no sort of connect. And the only solution to this is whether it's the lockdowns you're talking about, whether it's the millions of dollars being paid to inept, unelected health officials. The only solution to this, there's nothing as far as restructuring or planning or accountability metrics, because these people are the one who implement those things. We need smaller government. Brian Jean had this incredible quote at the UCP debate, and it was something, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something to the effect of, we need government that we forget exists.
Exactly.
Like, we literally need government. The government should not have $1 billion to squander on investment projects, because they don't. If they have $1 billion, it's because they've either taken it from us through our tax dollars, or they've borrowed it from our children. And then they're paying themselves so much money that if you're making $600,000 a year, who cares about a little bit of inflation? But for families trying to get by, I can tell you, month to month, I paid off like vehicles and I've done everything as best I can. But then you look at the month to month, it's like, oh, the city of Calgary took in, I don't know, millions of surplus. So this year, I think my taxes went up, my property taxes went up like $40 a month. They took in too much last year, and now they're bringing their property taxes up $40 a month during a pandemic when so many people are unserved. It's wild to see what is going on out there. But hopefully, I'm honestly skeptical. I'm not optimistic. This is so institutional that I don't know if there is a leadership candidate for the UCP, for the federal politics as well, that can actually destroy this megalithic, disastrous system. It is so bad. Like, you need someone extremely, and it's sad to see that Jason Kenney sort of went the way he did, because I think he was enough of a personality with enough experience that he could have gutted this thing and fixed it and set Alberta back on track.
Yeah.
But he just started playing the game the same as anyone else. I don't know if one of these other people, I hope I'm wrong, and I'd love to hear from some of these candidates. Some of these candidates are saying all the right things, but when push comes to shove, are they going to say, no, we're not doing that? No, unelected health officials don't get $500,000.
Well, and I think that's perhaps one of the issues with our political system, even though, democracy is the worst system except for all the other ones kind of thing. But I think one of the problems is the donations that are received by our politicians, the heavy donors that back them. You don't hear about them necessarily when they're campaigning, and the individual who is campaigning may stick to what they say for as long as they can. But once they're in that position of power, once those big donors are like, you're not making change, you want to be in here next round, well, then you're going to have to play ball. So there is that pressure that does come from these heavy donors and these heavy sponsors and people who just generally have a vested interest in the narrative going a certain way. They'll cling to these individuals, and then come election time, whoever actually comes out of the day winning, well, then we see who they really are.
And the interesting thing there, and I think that's something, this is in the United States, this is right across Canada, something that needs to be sort of addressed. We're running tight on time. We'll speed up after this, but is there are actually like reasonable election rules, so people can't massively contribute directly to a campaign. But one of the problems is like, you look at organizations like the Trudeau Foundation, like people while in office making a set amount, and this is every politician, it doesn't matter if it's Bush or Obama or Trudeau or whoever, they come out of the office millionaires when they weren't necessarily when they went in. There needs to be metrics of accountability, because that is purchased influence categorically. I really quickly want to get through some of this other stuff here, particularly, should we do one ad? Let's do one ad, and then we'll wrap up super quickly. We'll see if we have any chats coming in here as well. I haven't gotten any messages yet, but we'll see if we have any chats. But let's throw to this one ad right away, and then we'll wrap up here.
Adam Sos here for Rebel News. Our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
So just waiting to hear back from the studio if we do have any super chats or engagement from you guys. So hopefully they can hear. Okay, wonderful. So those will be coming momentarily here, I believe.
In the meantime, I see you've got that Pope article there. Is that the one you were looking at?
Yeah, let's talk about that one quickly, and then we'll get into these chats.
So, of course, as you guys know, the Pope was in town, or I guess I should say in Edmonton in Canada. He also went to Quebec for a little while, and you were actually up there in Edmonton to see this visit, I guess, come true. How was it? What was from start to finish, the end feeling of it?
Yeah, the sentiment I went with, and it's so interesting, I think if you actually think about the people in a sort of compassionate way, and you're genuinely interested in ameliorating situations, Pope Francis said that he hopes this is an opportunity for healing. I went and spoke with one of the priests who's involved in organizations, saying, that's great, looking to the past and apologizing is great, but there's boil water advisories that are still in place from the residential school era. Wouldn't it mean a lot more to do something tangible? And that is almost universally what I heard from people.
Exactly.
Is, let's have some tangible action. Let's have some meaningful progress on things like clean water, rather than simply apologizing for the past, because that would indicate through actions an actual change of heart.
Exactly.
So I think many people wanted to. I was sitting with some mainstream media when they put the headdress on, and they tried to pressure those chiefs and elders into saying, "Oh no," and they said, "No, we've appointed him, we've adopted him as one of our leaders." So I think the Indigenous response was, "It's hard and it's emotional, but I believe him." I think that there was some of that. There's that incredible shot. There's still attempts to politicize this. But I think the general overall sentiment that I got was, let's do something now. Let's let this extend to more than simply an apology. What can this lead to? What was your take on that?
Well, no, I like what you were saying there, and as well, it's let's do something instead of acting like the NDP or acting like the Liberals, who will just advocate for these individuals without actually giving them any good resolve by the end of the day. And that brings me to this headline there I see. So after Pope called residential schools genocide, the House of Commons should too, NDP MP. So we have that article there. What do you think about that? I mean, sure, the Pope calls residential schools genocide, but then this NDP MP, what do you take of their perspective?
You know, I think that, and this is very sort of progressive language, so I'm apprehensive to use it. But I think the intention from the federal government, by the way, who instituted, funded, rounded people up, was very much, and if you don't like me using this progressive terminology, I apologize in advance, the term sort of a cultural genocide, I think, is actually apropos. It's very fitting, because the intention was to sort of delete the culture, delete the language, delete all of that, so that they could basically be assimilated into society. And so I think that terminology is appropriate. I think this rhetoric of calling the entire residential school program a genocide, which is evidenced by the fact that these mass graves, it turns out they aren't mass graves. Most of the sort of unmarked grave scenarios were like tuberculosis, mass deaths, and there were proper burials.
At the least, do you think it's fair to say that this is a ideological genocide, or a genocide of the ideology? Because that was kind of the purpose of the residential schools. Not the purpose of the school wasn't, take as many Indigenous kids as you can and kill them.
No,
it was take them away from their heritage, their culture, and ingrain into them the backbone of the Bible, so to speak, from not necessarily from the most religious perspective, but from those in the state who were facilitating this.
Yeah, their intention was very much, and you can look into the history of this from the government yourself. The government was just brutal. There were times where they used terminology like the Indian experiment has failed and we must let them die. And then the Catholic Church actually said, whoa, we don't do that. We're not going to let these people die. By those points, very often the Indigenous communities were dependent on the residential schools, on the mission, on the work that was being done. But the government's legacy on this, make no mistake about it, the intention behind residential schools was to completely incorporate them into society. Now, was that from a place of evil colonialism? The issue is, as in Europe, they were sending their kids off to boarding schools in order for them to be indoctrinated into society as well.
Well, it's naivety and separation, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're across the pond in England and you're somehow have a hand in this colonialization of North America and these residential schools, well, you're looking at it from across the pond, right?
Yeah.
So there's already a separation of, okay, well, I send my kids to school, they're going to send their kids to school, right? It makes sense.
And but
then you come here and you see, how it ends up.
Exactly. And it doesn't excuse it, and it doesn't discount what happened. But I think we have to be, one of the conversations I had with the priest who was instrumental in organizing is truth and reconciliation. In the title is that word truth. So if we are going to base the process of reconciliation on rhetoric and lies and Justin Trudeau campaigns and allegations that these were concentration camps, there's never going to be reconciliation, because that's not earnest dialogue. That is destructive rhetoric. It's not a conversation. It's not a healing process whatsoever. So I think we have to be careful when we're using language, because so much of what we've we've seen so much of the division, so much of the picking at that scab is because of politicians using language to make points instead of attempting to address issues. We're over time. It's been great chatting with you. We have some super chats, so I'll read them out. They'll pop up on the screen, and then we can sort of interact with them. Sun Drez says, please interview Christopher James. Do you know Christopher James?
There's probably a few, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know Christopher James. I will look up Christopher James. Sun Drez also chips in $6 on the first one, chips in $2 and says, please interview Dr. Danielle Nagasse from Rimbey, Alberta. I have interviewed Dr. Danielle Nagasse. I think you have too. I know I have once or twice, in fact, twice for sure. And I think Drea may have as well, but we've done a lot of...
I might have briefly.
Yeah, we've done a lot of interviews with Dr. Danielle Nagasse, very interesting fellow for sure, and he's smart and he's direct and he doesn't shy away from things. So I think we have to do. I don't think we can have him on YouTube though, so you might have to check Rumble. Sandra also says 6 young doctors died last week in Toronto from. I don't even know if I can say this on YouTube. I can't for sure, but.
I'm going to say 6 young doctors died last week in Toronto from
from something.
The thing that we're not allowed to say.
Allegations made.
Nothing to do with.
There is an article on that as well. Someone wrote up a really great article on that, so that is out there. Frasbo gives $5 and says facts are facts. Quebec gets billions of dollars from Alberta. That is why they stayed in Confederation. Fact is, Alberta can go on its own. If the Trudeau Liberals stay in power, I can see the breakup of Canada. The other thing we have to do is rid ourselves of the WEF and WHO.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment to make.
Yeah.
And it comes to Quebec as well. I mean, when it comes to the energy industry, they mostly rely on hydro dams and that kind of production. And they signed a pretty deal with Newfoundland and Labrador a long time ago to get a lot of their energy for free. Not a lot nowadays, but back in the day. So they just like taking from other provinces.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say.
They like that. And you know what? It's a lot of people now are saying, you know what? Quebec said, you know what, we're out of here. And then they got a deal. I think lots of people in Alberta are, and they're not emptily threatening, but they're like, we're gonna go. Like this is an abusive relationship.
If I could just touch on that, I mean, there's the federal government and then there's the provincial governments. And personally, I don't actually have a problem with Quebec or whatever, because they're just taking advantage of the federal government when it comes to abusing the other provinces. They're taking advantage of the federal government, whereas the other provinces, and like Alberta, we're being taken advantage of by the federal government. So this squandering between Alberta and Quebec, I think it's more so just the federal government not knowing how to facilitate provinces that want different things.
I think we have so much in common, actually. And when you start, it was interesting. You'll talk with sometimes there'll be like Quebec rodeo guys and Alberta rodeos. Yeah. On a sort of fundamental level, we're both like, leave us alone. And I'm French, so I can say this to an extent. I think the French can be a little quicker to anger. So Alberta's just taking its time, but Quebec was like, this is ridiculous. We're not doing this. We're out of here. So they got this deal. Alberta's like, wait a minute. Those guys might have been onto something. Quebecers and Albertans have more in common than you might think.
For sure.
Sundress gives us another $3 and says something I absolutely cannot say on YouTube, nor will we post it. But thank you very much. I really appreciate your support, and we'd be happy to discuss it elsewhere, certainly. Braspo gives $1 and says, back in 1972, National Airlines had the best ads on TV. Here's a YouTube one. I bet you couldn't show this ad today, probably not. Still have a smile on my face. We can't share the link, but I'm sure National Airlines, you can YouTube and check out that ad. C1 Cass gives $2 and said, why would Hinshaw not allow doctors to try early treatments with proven safe drugs? That may have caused the death of many people. I think this is probably safe to say. And then something hush money that I won't say.
Well, in terms of the hush money aspect, I mean, who's to say, right? You know, I'm not a right hand, man. I'm not there to detail everything of what happened in her career over the last 2 years, right? But certainly when you receive those kinds of funds and there's a narrative being emitted by hundreds of experts and politicians around the world, well, you're likely to want to emanate that.
And the other thing on that I think I will say that is completely safe and sort of self-evident and that no one should take umbrage with, the lack, the sort of comorbidities that contributed to serious outcomes, the lack of sort of advocacy from healthcare officials to go to the gym and get in shape and address some of these comorbidities to significantly reduce negative outcomes. This is not discounting something they said or questioning it. It's wondering why it wasn't sort of emphasized, because we did see that was a sort of massive contributing factor to serious negative outcomes.
Well,
so
they'll tell you to take the drugs, but they won't tell you to be healthy.
Yeah. And I'm here happily, not as a doctor, not offering medical advice, but pretty safely saying that it's probably not a bad thing to be healthy.
Yeah.
I think that's all for our chats. I don't think we're missing anything else. I want to thank you guys so much for the great interaction. I once again want to thank our sponsor, the Alberta Prosperity Project. You can find out the incredible work they're doing on so many of these issues we talked about. Alberta issues, fair deal for Alberta, Alberta sovereignty.
Yeah, so check those guys out. And as well, I just want to say, if Alberta does end up ever taking that road of separation, I'm sure the Alberta Prosperity Project will have a strong hand in helping the province. And as well, for those who are in other areas of the country who might not want to be in those parts of the country once Alberta decides to separate, well, come on over. Alberta is one of the most loving places in Canada. So I would encourage it. And I'm sure the APP has a lot more to add to that.
Plenty of room at the table. So again, thanks so much. Go to albertaprosperityproject.com. And as always, I want to thank you so much, Sid. Good job today. Thanks to everyone in the Rebel Studios for making this possible. And most importantly, thanks so much for you watching at home. If you weren't there, we simply wouldn't be doing this. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're brought to you by the viewers. So that's you guys. And thank you very much.
Thanks.